Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest, returning guest. His name is John C. Brady, Brady. And we talked a couple times about two very interesting cases. We just talked about the CEO killer Luigi Mangione, and then we did a psychological analysis. And then the earlier show, we covered John's book titled Psychological DNA, a cold case analysis of who killed Robert F. Kennedy. So these are two great books. And while I was reading through that, he was telling me about this, and I noticed this other book on a really interesting topic. And we're going to get into it in detail. If you're watching this on Rockfin Rumble or Rockfin Rumble or Twitter X, you will see the title of the book. It's Men of Steel, Men of Steel. Is crime addictive? Three men who found out. And it's a really interesting book. I read through it today. Some of the stuff I'm very familiar with. I grew up in Northern California, so some of these characters, at least one was nearby. I'm in LA now too, so it's kind of like some of these characters. Their names are William Del Biagio, Bruce McNall, and John Spano, but John can talk more about that. So, John, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. So, for people who may not have heard our earlier shows, maybe you can just do a little overview of your work and what led you to. I know this book wasn't published recently, but maybe what you can do is talk about what led up to the writing of this book, Men of Steel.
Well, thanks. The impetus really for this book was based on a previous book that I wrote, which was concerning why rich women steal when they have it all. So there was this unknown vein of psychological mystery concerning why rich people steal when they really don't have to. That kind of led in from the shoplifting book, from wealthy women that stole millions of dollars in jewelry and purses. That led into my looking into these three characters in this book, Men of Steel, whose one commonality was that they stole money to support or to buy hockey teams. So I thought it was really kind of interesting that they had this compulsive fascination with being a hockey team owner, and I wanted to know why that they crossed the line, even though they were all three were pretty wealthy at the time, but why they risked everything to become owners of hockey teams. And what I found out was kind of intriguing from each of these individuals. I found out actually there were more psychological commonalities between the three than there were differences, and I wanted to emphasize those, so I wrote the book.
Right, and these were kind of interesting stories. It seems like they were all drawn by the kind of prestige and being among the elite. That seemed to be a psychological motivation more than money. Because, like you said, these guys already kind of had money, and some of these, the money they took was substantial sums, right?
Yeah, Bruce McNall, for example, who owned the L.A. Kings for a short period of time, he was fabulously wealthy before he made the acquisition. He then turned to the kind of the dark side and began to steal money from banks, including, I guess the total was about $238 million that he stole to support other losing enterprises. But prior to this, he was very successful. He was a producer of Weekend at Bernie's, Mr. Mom, the Fabulous Baker Boys. I mean, he was really well uh, suited to the L.A. Hollywood lifestyle. And then something happened. Something happened with all three of these people, and I wondered really what it was. So I personally interviewed them, not just relying on speculative sources or from media or newspapers. I interviewed each of them, and the bottom line was that each of them felt that they had an addictive quality in their personality where they couldn't stop. Once they started stealing, they couldn't stop.
And it shares this kind of thing. These are there are other people like this. That one girl who did Theranos, this huge con of hundreds of millions of dollars, even going back to Ponzi. So this is a common, Or you mentioned Madoff in the book as well. So this is kind of common motif or an archetype of these guys who steal. Some stole from banks, but some also stole from people, which like ruined, like they're capable for whatever their draw is to ruining financial institutions and
Yeah,
other people's lives, right?
yeah, that's right. I mean, Elizabeth Holmes, that started Theranos when she was 19 years old. She's now in a federal prison in Bryan, Texas. She was is a pretty good example of what I call the reverse Robin Hood syndrome. And this is just the opposite of the historic or legendary Robin Hood that we read about. These are people that steal from the rich to give to the even more wealthy people, and she was a typical example that ties into the same kind of a motivational pattern that the three people in Men of Steel had, that they wanted more, to have more, but they wanted more to be more. They wanted more adulation. They wanted more uh, enhancement to their self concept. Underneath this layer of adulation is a layer of depression. So each of these three people were not clinically depressed, but they were depressed enough to the extent that they couldn't stop. So in the Men of Steel, I categorize these three people as experiencing an addiction to stealing.
Right. And so that has its own kind of phenomenon in itself, is like the rush, the risk taking. Like you really
That's right.
broke it down into like five different traits, but also you have an acronym, the BATS too, right?
Yeah, that's right. So there is a five-stage process that these people experienced, which were similar to the rich shoplifters who I analyzed before. So there was this tremendous need, or the trigger that set them into this desire to steal. Then the second phase, they had to morally justify why they were taking these steps. So they had to wrestle with their own conscience. And this is something that Elizabeth Holmes, of course, had to deal with over 10 years when she was defrauding investors. And the same thing with the three people in the Men of Steel. The third stage is the actual stealing, which, as you mentioned, and which is a good point. There is a sense of rush. There is a sense of enhancement of self-esteem, elevation when they pull off the job. So there's an intellectual part of it that they're clever enough to be able to execute the crime. After the crime, then they go into a state of more or less confusion, where they don't know what they did in stages one, two, and three was really legitimate, and the cycle repeats itself based on an outside trigger. With some of the with Boots Del Baggio, for example, he was in Silicon Valley, and he envied the people in Silicon Valley who he saw as having everything. He had enough. He was a partial owner of the San Jose Sharks, but he wanted even more. So he entered into a contract to buy the Nashville Predators, but in order to do that, he had to expropriate money. So as you said before, that some of these people, and he's one of he stole from actual clients that he had. He was a very successful investment banker. He shepherded three IPOs uh, through his company. He was very wealthy. He started, as a matter of fact, he started a bank when he was 24 years old or 25 years old with his father, a very successful bank that's still in existence today. He tossed it all away because, as he told me, he couldn't stop.
Yeah, and that's like the compulsion, the continual thing. Like they're all similar in that way. Is like deal makers, they must get this addiction, this kind of endorphin rush of doing deals, and then it spins out of control because they were all legit. Like McNall, sorry, was a really skilled, knowledgeable guy, like a real type A. And now you said even in the book, everybody said good things about him. So he had a good reputation, right?
Oh, he did. I mean, he was a great film producer. You know, when I met with him in his studio in Santa Monica, he was very gracious, just a lovely person. But I think Larry Elder, the commentator who also ran for governor of California, he put it the best way. He said that Bruce McDowell was the sweetest, nicest, most affable con man that he ever met. I mean, he was just a wonderful person, and he was a great person to interview. But underneath this was this addictive patterning that, to some extent, ties into the next psychological factor, which is self sabotage. So underneath this is a veneer of doing things against your own best self-interest that leads to disaster. And all three of these men ended up in federal prison for stealing millions of dollars. John Spano, who bought the New York Islanders, was an amazing example. When he stood atop of the New York Coliseum arena at a hockey game. I mean, he looked like Napoleon. People said he looked like a small Napoleon standing at the top with people screaming at him, "Save the team, Spano! Save the team, Spano!" So this fed his ego, and he had this other component, which was he has almost a spiritual or a religious tenacity to do good. So he wanted to save the team, and partially he did save the team, and and Bruce McDowell wanted to save the L.A. Kings. So there was this, as I said, almost a religious fervor to do good. Well, actually, they were doing bad, which is part of the reverse Robin Hood syndrome. That they're stealing from pretty much wealthy people to give them themselves to do bad things. So it's a psychological paradox, which I tried to figure out starting, as I said, way back with shoplifters. But here you have people that, Del Baggio probably stole over 160 million, Bruce McDowell 238 million, um, John Spano 150 million, and they needed this reinforcement in order to enhance their self concepts.
Right. It is odd. It must be like their persona. They had to maintain this persona of an outwardly successful guy to get all of the accolades. Like you might like when they walked into the arena, people would say their name or they would sit up in the favored booth. So it's kind of like this synthetic reasoning they use to obtain these goals, like how they justified and kept the fraud going. So they defrauded others, but they're continually defrauding every day, just like the woman from Theranos. Like she must have had all the way till the end before it all unraveled. She must have been like, adulating. She was like the next Steve Jobs. Remember? I mean, that was
Yeah, I
really
mean,
her. Yeah.
yeah, and I noticed that you use a term that I use, which is synthetic reasoning. So a lot of this is based on these rationalizations or irrational statements that people make that I call synthetic reasoning. That if they can accomplish their goal, then the whatever means they use can be justified. So with Bruce McDowell, he knew that he could probably pay back the loans to a French bank if he got the TV rights for the LA Kings. John Spano told me that the cable contract with the New York Islanders would exceed $100 million. That would allow him to pay back the loan, and therefore there's no foul. But I told him, I said, look, you already stole the money though. Now you're going to pay it back with a cable TV contract that actually didn't materialize until after the team was taken away from him. So this synthetic reasoning ties into the self-sabotage behavior where these people become self-destructive. Elizabeth Holmes is a perfect example from a wealthy family in Washington and then Houston who got off the track, and she became this visionary ideologue savior and wanted to change the healthcare system in kind of a different way from what Luigi Mangione that we talked about before, what he was doing. Elizabeth Holmes started out with altruistic beliefs and a theory behind her that she could change things, but in the process, she really lost her center and she began to do things that were illegal and ultimately ended up in her being imprisoned.
Right. It was the same thing. Her fraud was incredible, $600 million or something. And she went out, she defrauded very big wigs, like a lot of very important people. And even McCall did. I think he was associated with the Lakers or something. But I mean, those were banks. But he was a big player in LA. It was not a joke. I think he produced War Games too, which is still a
He
really good
he
movie.
he he did. Matthew Broderick, he did. I mean, he was even when this self-adulation goes even farther. So when you're talking about Bruce McDowell, he goes to federal prison in Lompoc, and he has movie stars visiting him. So Magic Johnson shows up, and he's signing basketballs for the inmates. It's kind of like a party. So Goldie Hawn shows up, Kurt Russell, and other movie stars to visit their star, their fallen star, who was in prison for 5 years in Lompoc. But this, as I said, this self-adulation just didn't end with the crime or with his being prosecuted and sent to prison. It just continued, and it was kind of a, a continuing soap opera in L.A. where he was connected to Heidi Fleiss, the famous madam. I mean, these stories that he had. I mean, you really couldn't make him up. This guy was so interesting of a personality, and that's why I wanted to interview him.
He was kind of a polymath too, in a way. Like he got involved in financial fraud, but he really got to start in like smuggling coin stuff. He was in into high art, things like that. He's a fascinating character, there's no question.
Yeah, I mean, he was fascinated with the Raiders movies. He was fascinated with movie stars. One person called him the Raider of the Lost Art because he had smuggled art. He worked at the Getty Museum. He was selling false statuary out of the back door of the museum when it was on PCH Road in Santa Monica or Malibu, and he made his way across the Middle East, smuggling coins, and which was very dangerous at the time because the mandatory prison was like 40 years in prison if you got caught. So he was always pushing the envelope, but underneath this, he was also sabotaging what was a great career, and his business acumen was good until the end. So they say with bankruptcy, it happens real slow until it happens very fast. It happened very fast with him, and he got caught.
Right, and they always seem to think they can make it back on the end. I mean, even Elizabeth Holmes too. It's like they're keeping the fraud going, but there's something's going to happen that's going to extricate them from this problem. Probably because they've probably pulled off other things in the past, so that
Well,
psychology's set.
I mean,
And I think
that's
you
right.
meant,
I mean,
yeah.
so there's a whole pattern of deception, of being a fraud person underneath, and you're doing something wrong, but you have to justify it because, as I said before, the Machiavellian thing, the means will be justified by the ends. With Elizabeth Holmes, she was going to revolutionize the healthcare industry, particularly drug testing, that she saw as kind of like a Mangione in a Mangione way. as being discriminate against people that couldn't afford expensive blood testing. So she started out with pretty altruistic motives. However, when her uh, testing equipment called the Edison box didn't work, then she began to drift into this fraud situation along with her co-conspirator, this guy Sonny Balwani. So it's really kind of a tragic story of a person who started out, even her greatest critics, John Carreyrou from the New York Times wrote a or a Wall Street Journal, excuse me, wrote a really scathing article, but he said that she really did start out as being an altruistic savior kind of person, that she wanted to help. And that was the same thing with John Spano. He really wanted to help the people in New York. They'd had uh, 4 winning seasons in a row. Then they went into a slump. He came in and he wanted to be the savior. With Boots Del Baggio, he was a lesser savior, but he wanted the notoriety. He wanted to be important. He ended up in the same prison as McNeil did. He ended up in Lompoc prison for 8 years. So, these characters start out sometimes with positive motivations, but underneath it, if you become addicted and you can't stop, you don't know where the stop sign is, and you keep pushing the envelope, suddenly bad things will happen. And in the case of Theranos, I mean, that's $800 million that she pretty much fraudulently stole from people who were naive investors that had no understanding of biochemistry, of histology, of blood testing. They just gave her the money based on her tremendous charisma and hype. So she was everywhere. Bruce McNeil was everywhere in Los Angeles, Spago. Wolfgang Puck was one of his friends. He lived in Holmby Hills. You know where that is.
Sure.
He had 5 Ferraris in his garage. He had a maid and a cook. All was gone after this addictive process took over, and he couldn't stop.
Right. No, it's incredible. And you met some of these guys firsthand, right? I mean,
I met all of them.
what's your
Like,
impression when you like see them face to face?
oh, they're just like Larry Elder said of Bruce McNeil, the nicest, sweetest, most affable con man you could ever meet. He was just wonderful. He welcomed me into his studio in Santa Monica. It was delightful. We had great conversations, introduced me to the staff. I mean, he's a very welcoming person. But underneath this is this overcompensatory part of him that needs this gratification, and he became addicted to stealing. With Del Baggio and Spano, they had kind of a cross addictive pattern because they were addicted to cocaine that was very popular. 25 years ago, everybody was doing cocaine. So they had a cross addiction to drugs, whereas Bruce was addicted to stealing and to becoming a a super producer, film producer, and a very wealthy man. And he was already wealthy when he started out, which is the main thesis of my reverse Robin Hood syndrome, is that these people start out rich, but they can't stop. There's something that drives them. There's psychological factors that make them lose their center, make them lose their moral courage, and they begin to deviate.
Right. It is incredible. Like there's a spot there where they have everything, that they're in the 1% or something, but that still isn't enough. It's very odd. Like they said, and you kind of put it in a piece of it is kind of like losing your equilibrium or core, but also a lack of self-esteem. Like they're not comfortable with where they are at that given time. They need to fill even more into their kind of personality. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do agree with that. It's not just to put more into the personality. is to contribute more cash to their welfare. So at one point, this Elizabeth Holmes was worth $4.5 billion. These were private placement offerings with her company. She was worth $4.5 billion. At the end, she was worth zero. So she profited somewhat from a lavish lifestyle like McNall did and like John Spano did. I mean, they were kind of high rollers, with McNall rolling around Beverly Hills in one of five Ferraris with a driver, a cook, and a maid, and going to the Coliseum or to where the Kings played, and he's being adored and worshipped as the savior of the team. So the savior, he had sort of a savior complex where he wanted to do good, but suddenly something went terribly wrong, and he started to manipulate financial statements, had unfair dealings with banks, began to bribe bankers, began to bring these bankers from Paris to Malibu and set them up in very elaborate condominiums, whereas the the bankers were kind of confused because Bruce owed 238 million, and they were supposed to be watching him, but he was contributing back funds from the bank to them to keep the fraud going. So Bruce told me that when you owe the bank $1 million, the bank owns you, but when you owe the bank $238 million, you own the bank.
Right. That's interesting. It's like the savings and loan scandal or something like that. Like it's
Yeah,
really something else. And these guys, I mean, once their reputations were kind of torched and they went to jail, I think Spano got rearrested 3 or 4 times for just fraud. He couldn't stop forging checks or something like that, right?
yeah, that's right. He got rearrested for an accounting fraud in a low level company. That may have been a induced false confession that he spent the next 10 years in prison. I think he was just recently released on that charge. But at this point, all you can do is hope that he's seen the light and that he will get some sort of a treatment for this behavioral addiction. This behavioral addiction, in my view, is every bit as powerful as a chemical addiction. So you have positive addictions, bicycling, working out, you know, other kinds of positive things. Then you have negative addictions, such as stealing, where the person can't separate themselves from these impulses until something changes or there's some kind of an intervention, Stealers Anonymous or something. Then the pattern will continue. With Bruce McNall, he's as popular now as he ever was. So this interlude in prison didn't tarnish his career. As I said, he had movie stars up there playing basketball with the inmates, and he was just the man of the hour. I mean, he was, on the Tonight Show, he was praised as being a genius. Although in the bottom line is he's also a criminal.
Like a convicted criminal. Like it's incredible. And they're mystified how they got themselves into that much trouble when it's over. Don't you think? Like, wow, I really just kind of dug and kept digging until I was caught. Like they
Yeah,
couldn't
I mean, I think all
extricate
three
themselves.
of these characters kind of lack, self-awareness to understand why they jeopardized everything in order to have more, which is the reverse Robin Hood syndrome, that they don't have the self-awareness to realize that maybe five Ferraris is enough for Bruce in a mansion in Holmby Hills, that he needs more. So he was a clever person. All three of these characters were very clever early on in their developmental patterning, and I think that's extremely important. where they weren't just the average person. Bruce started out as a teenager, and he accumulated over $60,000 in a coin collection, which is pretty good. Most kids are interested in getting their driver's license, and Bruce was trading coins. He moves on to work for the Getty. He goes to Europe. He's smuggling coins. He gets involved in horse racing. He's extremely successful. He won the French Grand Prix twice, which is like the Kentucky Derby.
Wow.
So he had this whole history of being able to win, and it just it disappears into this thing that I can do anything. This sort of omniscient feeling that I'm the savior and I can do whatever I want to do, and no matter what it takes or who I hurt in the process.
It's like the classic Greek Icarus archetype. Like they just keep
Yeah,
flying higher and higher, and then it all burns down.
that's
Like, I
right.
mean, it's like, how high is enough? And it's like, I'm going to just strive and strive. Maybe it's like, it's also self reinforcing because the environment these competitive rich people are in, they're also with other competitive rich people. So they're not competing with the average Joe. They're competing with the other guys who have the nicer, mansion or
Yeah.
the yacht or the super yacht or whatever. So they feel diminished by these super, super rich people, which I think the average person who's just trying to pay rent would find strange and amusing. But their mentality, if they read like the Joan Robert report or whatever, these like rich
Mhm.
magazines, they caught up in
Mhm.
that. And I think a lot of these guys, that's the same. They're very much status and financially driven. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's absolutely true, particularly in Silicon Valley where Boots grew up. I mean, this whole philosophy of fake it till you make it idea that you just string people along until you finally are successful, regardless of what happens in the end. You tried to do something, but you in the process you draw in all these other people. I mean, Del Baggio stole from his private clients. He stole from his own bank. So his addictive behavior was really out of control, and he more or less negated his whole background that was very successful Catholic altar boy, a prime citizen, starting a bank when you're age 24, and then at 35 you're in federal prison. Something went wrong, and it's hard to justify that by somebody was plotting against me or somebody made me do this. You made this happen to yourself, and it's because you had these addictive tendencies deep in your personality, accompanied with a sense of self sabotage, where you actually feel bad about yourself, and the part of you wants to expose you so you will be caught. So there's a whole paradox concerning these people's rise and their fall. As you say, Icarus is a great example. All three of them flew way too close to the sun. They crashed and burned, and Bruce McNeil had the biggest parachute because he's still successful in Hollywood.
It's incredible. The report I meant to say is Rob report.
Yeah,
So the
yeah.
Rob report. I misstated. It's not Roberts. But yeah, it is incredible. And you see this, it's kind of almost like a professional archetype for people growing up who go through different paths, academia, psychology, but that financial path where the fast life, bright lights, big city cocaine and finance, and then burnout. I mean, or even worse, like these guys still had their lives. I mean, they left a lot of carnage in their wake, but yeah, it's still out there. This kind of stuff is going on. I mean, I think Elizabeth Holmes is a perfect example. These guys kind of predated her, but I'm old enough to have gone through the SNL crisis where the same thing happened. Like they just kept taking money because it was free and easy, and somebody was giving it to them, and there were kickbacks and corruption, and It's just
Yeah, well,
incredible.
it was, I mean, that's an interesting story. If you look at Michael Milken, for example, in Los Angeles, he asked his brother from
He just locked up a little bit there. Yeah, Milken was another one. There was these whole like guys on Wall Street, just all Milken and Madoff and these other guys just stealing money left and right. It was really incredible. But hopefully John will pop back in. This book again is Men of Steel, Steal. Let me pull up John's website. I do have it here somewhere. Let's see. You're back.
William.
You just kind of stopped for a little bit there. Maybe you can pop back in.
Okay.
You were talking about Milken before you dropped
Yeah,
out.
yeah. I mean, he was a very interesting character because he asked his brother sitting in Santa Monica how much it would cost to buy everything all the way to the ocean. So he had tons of money, but he didn't steal for money. He stole because of his ego. He lived in the same house next to his mother in Encino his entire life, so he was
Wow.
motivated purely by the his own guile, and that he was smarter than all the bankers, and he knew how to extend these CMOs and these bonds in the
His
SNL.
junk bonds. Yeah, junk bonds.
Yeah, he was the king of the junk bonds, but he didn't do it for money. He did it for because he could get over on people.
Wow. So he enjoyed the kind of scam. He
He
enjoyed the
enjoyed it,
scam.
and
Yeah.
by the way, his whole theory was based on an obscure article he read when he was an undergraduate at UC Berkeley in a financial uh, journal that said that if you mix the right amount of junk bonds with valid bonds, that the in the end they average out, and you can make a profit from it. So he carried that all the way down to Los Angeles when he was the junk bond king, but then he fell.
It's another example. They all kind of get the
Yeah.
catches up with him. So, although I think he came out financially okay at the end. Like I think he did jail time and had to pay some money back, but I don't know. Some of these guys ferret things away. I'm not really sure how much money they give back or they've scammed off, but it's these people are out there. People need to watch out like these kind of financial swindlers who, like you said, they get in trouble. They fly too high and they don't care about who they hurt, and they're in deep and they're just trying to get their way out of it. They're out there. The
Well,
men of steel really are out there. It's
that's
a
right.
it's just a personality archetype in this world. It's just the way it
Right,
is.
and they'll steal from you unless you can insulate yourself
Yeah.
from the glitter, the gloss, from the PR stuff. Because all three of these guys were very adroit salespeople. I mean, they could sell anything to anybody, and the converse is they could steal anything from anybody they wanted to.
Yeah, it's incredible. John, we are at the 40-minute mark. Is there anything you'd like to add or anything I missed before we wrap it up?
No, it's a very nice interview
Yeah.
to traverse the subject of why these reverse Robin Hood characters, why they steal when they really don't have to, and it's purely for psychological reasons. And I think you're introducing of Elizabeth Holmes is another additive factor, and a very interesting character to analyze psychologically why she did it when she didn't have to, why Spano did it when he didn't have to, why Boots did it in Silicon Valley and didn't have to, and why Bruce McNeil, of all the people, successful Hollywood movie producer, why he did it when he didn't have to. So I think it's a nice bow tied around this addictive personality type when they just can't stop.
John, where can people find the book? It's on Amazon. I saw that. I think you have a Kindle version, right?
Amazon.com, my website, which is johncbrady.com. The other books you can find on Trine Day, TRINE Day publishers, um, or as I said, Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Barnes and Noble's a good one.
Barnes and Noble, Amazon, and the best place to contact you is through your website, right? johncbrady.com.
Correct, or through the publisher Trine Day.
Trine Day, gotcha. And you have, how many books have you published right now? There's at least 8, right?
7.
7. So 7 total books. And
I'm
again, the
keeping
book,
you busy reading.
that's good. That's good. I mean, these are great. I mean, understanding this particular archetype for somebody in this world where we all rely on money is very important, because you could run into one in your career and not understand their swindling you. You know, that none of these people, just like people who walk into a cult, they never think they're in a cult. And the same people who walk up against a financial fraudster, they don't really know it. If they knew, they wouldn't get involved. So you got to really watch out and look for kind of tangible things or something. But again, the book, yeah. Go ahead.
That's right, and I appreciate you, retracing these men's careers, because they're really interesting reading of how they got there, and
Yeah.
from the creative beginnings that they had.
Yes.
As really all three were brilliant students, and then how tragic it is when finally the Icarus syndrome takes over. They crash and burn.
Yeah, they could have just kept their creative things going. Okay, I've got to slow down. Let me find another business. That's what a lot of business people do. They find a new creative outlook for whatever, or outlet for their business acumen, and find another business, start a new business. But these guys decided that I'm going to go the fraud route. But yeah, really great read, and very important to understand their psychology. And the title of the book again is Men of Steel: A Brief Look at the Psychology of Celebrity Theft is the name of this article, but the title of the book, Men of Steel: Is Crime Addictive? 3 Men Who Found Out. I think it is addictive, psychologically addictive. And the author is Dr. John C. Brady, Brady. And I'll put a link to his.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, John. Thanks for your time.
Oh, thank you so much, Willie. I really appreciate it a lot.
Likewise. Stay there.
We'll talk soon.